the intent of a previous recommendation and to correct errors in the B2D Downtown Business Zone and the B3 General Business Zone to include uses permitted and as regulated in the B2 zone. That's a lot of words. Mayor Weil, could you tell us what that all means?
Okay. This was a recommendation sent to you, I think, April 30th, 2009. We had meetings, Planning Commission, City Planning Commission, which I am a member, discussed several pieces of the zoning code, Title 23. In particular, it was pointed out by the code director, John Paskey, that there were some errors in there, or rather ambiguities. To start with, I'll go with the first one, the B3 230407-3, B3 General. This was brought up earlier, if you remember, concerning the drive-ins, and the thought was that we would change it from drive-in, drive-through, eating and drinking places, provided the principal building shall be at least 200 feet from an R1 or R2 zone. I think we thought this would clarify it. Again, we, at the point of the Planning Commission, thought these were more typos than anything else. So therefore, we did not realize that you wanted to go through a public hearing on it. But it's just as well that you do a pro forma. Again, it was to delineate the fact that there are drive-ins and drive-throughs, but the fact is the reservation of eating and drinking establishments of having drive-in, drive-throughs should be away from residential areas. That's one item. The other item was two sections of 230405 and 230406. This has to do with the B2D district, or rather, no, 06, sorry. The B2D district says downtown business zone. And it pretty much says the same as specified in B3, except for scheduled bulk controls A. The intention of that, of course, is really it's talking about the B2 zones for B2D zones. If you remember, our code is like a cupcake or hierarchical. It's basically everything that you can do in B1 you can do in B2, plus additions, and in theory everything you can do in B2 you can do in B3. This typo, which was, remember the code was done in 2003, probably was supposed to be referencing B2s, in other words going back to it with the exception of bulk controls. What you're talking about now is like an inverted cupcake if you say you can do everything in B2 that you can do in B3. So that we felt was a typo as well. Again, think of the cupcake, the small one up being on top being B1s, B2 bigger. B2, the difference between B2 and B2D has to do with setbacks. In B3 you can do more stuff. There are limited things that you can't do, but it's much more generalized. So that we felt was probably a mistake on it. The other section, last section is 230407. This is B3 General Business Zones. And that's part A, says permitted principal uses, any use permitted and as regulated in B2D zones, except thereafter modified in the following conditions. We felt that that was actually referring to B2s and not B2Ds, again with the setback models. Although if you really look at the bulk controls, there's not a lot in there concerning setbacks, but the concept there we thought it should go to the general business zones rather than the specific of the downtown area, which is what the D denotes. Have I confused you enough? Do you have questions?
Well, let's remember what a public hearing is for, number one.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much for clarifying it and outlining exactly what it is, but a public hearing is exactly that, to hear comments from the public. We have several people in the audience tonight. Is there anyone wishing to speak to this? If we could ask you, Mr. Smeltzer, to come to the podium, identify yourself and either your address or your affiliation.
Okay, 18 West State, Mike Smeltzer.
I've been pursuing this for a couple of years, on and off, and I am in favor of the rezoning. I guess the reasons would be that the comprehensive plan calls it out.
I don't think this is really the issue you think it is.
Yeah, this is actually talking about something different. This is not rezoning of your neighborhood. Everything else. This is actually changing the some of the definitions, or rather some of the wordage that was in the section as is. It does not. It will not affect you. You'll have an opportunity sooner or later on that. Yes.
Aha! But not today.
Not today.
Okay.
This essentially was a typo where it should be basically B2. It was listed as B3. And the same thing with the B2D section was a mistake.
Okay.
Carrying over from 2003.
While I'm here, where are we in the process that I was hoping to address today?
Okay, the drift off, still within the
If I
public
could.
hearing, I
Okay.
know.
All right.
The City Planning Commission met, I think, about almost 2 weeks ago. Mr. Wharton was there.
Right. I got the minutes, yep.
Speaking for you, okay. Essentially, what I'm hearing is that we'll probably revisit this on the City Planning Commission level.
Okay.
I know that Mr. Bittner, the chair, felt that this was redundant since it's already been passed by the Planning Commission
Okay.
multiple times.
I would seem to agree with that, but okay.
But again, I think because there's both new members on the Planning Commission and new members on Council, I think the consensus was that we should actually look at it again. And I suspect they will have another recommendation coming through.
Mr. Mayor, does it have a case number yet at this point so that it can't be not dealt with because it's a communication, and so if the meeting doesn't happen, that's kind of what happened a little bit, I think, in August, September, right?
To tell you the truth, I saw a printout of the Planning Commission, but I don't remember if there was a case.
Okay. If there's not, how do I do that so that it progresses?
Usually, when you get case numbers, you put an application in.
Okay.
So that means putting writing a check.
Easily done. Okay.
Yes.
And who should I talk to about how to
Talk to
orchestrate that?
Charlene, Secretary.
Okay.
Administration assistant. She was out last week, so that's why I think the Planning Commission agenda was put together by Paul Logan. Mayor Polinoff on there. I think it may be in the communications still, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Apologies, everyone.
That's okay.
We'll get to it.
This is information.
Okay.
Like when I saw you here tonight, I thought you probably
Maybe
had
you
it
got-
confused on which public hearing this one really
About
was.
6 o'clock saying that my idea would be on the agenda.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for showing up. You sure you wouldn't like to hear what else we have to talk about? Thank you, Mike.
Let me read the agenda.
We've had some other people come in, and due to the laws and requirements of a public hearing, we
There
are
is a
going
sign-up
to
sheet
ask
passed
that all
around.
of you
Sarah,
sign
do you have that?
the sign-in sheet.
Anybody new who came in new?
We are supposed to have a complete list of everybody that would be in attendance at any public hearing, so if that can come around, and those that have just joined us, please sign. Is there anyone else wishing to speak before council on this public hearing?
I will just mention
Mayor
that
Weil.
the item that Mrs. Smelser was talking about is that we will probably look at that, and again, it's been passed to council previously. One of the pieces of information that I've been searching for was a catalog of the number of commercial parking that was in that zone, the B3 zone at the time. I've been searching my books on it. Actually, it probably disappeared along with Steve Pearson, and we could always recount them. But if anybody has one of those things, and I know, yes, I'm looking at the pack rats in the group there, and I figured that you might have copies of it.
Yeah, and I would also say that it isn't exactly correctly correctly, but we did offer to change it, and council did, and reinstall the 500-foot limit, which had been in place when it was all one zone.
And
They said, absolutely not, that isn't what we want, as you recall, because
I
I think you
recall
were
that,
on
yes.
council.
So as it stands now, the height has been modified, so it can't go to 6 stories or 7 stories. And the only thing that would be differentiate was to reestablish that 500-foot zone, which was taken out. I think that was in the 92 or 93.
And that's when they split it into 2 zones from 1.
Yes.
And they did a lot of other stuff that I can't understand.
It's been progressing. quite some time.
Progressively deteriorating.
Okay. That's all I have to say, and it's not even on the public hearing.
Well, are there any comments from any member of council regarding the public hearing? And nobody else from the audience wishing to speak? Members' hands?
Will we see this coming to us for an ordinance for approval?
I believe so.
So this-
Yes.
Change again?
Yeah. Which, I'm not too sure should be more referred to as a correction than a real change, but I don't think it's really been handled differently than how we will be reflecting it. Is that pretty much correct, Mayor Weil?
Yeah. Again, the B3 part, which had to be referencing the B2D section, 230406, we felt was a straight-out typo. The comma in there went back and forth depending on how good you were in grammar. And tell you the truth, being a scientist, and I stayed away from essay questions as much as possible. I deferred to those who knew better. The other one, interesting enough, the B3, where it references B2D, one of the drafts I saw had both B2 and B2D in that draft, but it did not make it in. One didn't make it in for some reason, so I'm not sure why that occurred. So obviously there was some kind of thought where both of them were in and then one dropped out. But at this point we think the wrong one dropped out. So I look at it more as typographical errors more than anything else. But I know those who are on council that long ago remember that this was a monster to deal with. I think you guys were meeting every Wednesday, work sessions.
Was this not Ed Baum's change of?
Yes.
But then the planning commission completely changed it again,
Yes.
same time. We were taking out our own appendix.
Yeah.
I mean, it was terrible.
I remember that.
It was terrible.
I think the advice from Dale Tamke at that time was never do it again.
Right. There
Hire
are people
somebody.
out there that are experts. That's what we do.
Yeah.
Okay. We will have to look at this eventually, the entire code. We're finding, we have now realized in this point in time, we have two different outside fresh eyes, so to speak. John Paskey, the code enforcement, director of code enforcement, and Paul Logue, the planner. And they both point out that this is real, a mishmash of things that's been added, and it's a paradigm that was established in 1969 thereabouts and hasn't changed that much. It can't vary that much, though, because you're still limited by higher revised code in some of these things, but the actual what we want can be modified quite a bit if we choose to. It just takes a lot of work to do.
Other comments? Seeing none, we will draw to a close this public hearing, and at 7:30 we will go into a regular session of City Council. Good evening. Welcome back to Athens City Council. Again, it's Monday, October 19th, 2009, and this evening City Council is meeting in regular session. We do have a quorum with all members of council present. Disposition of minutes, we have before us the minutes from the regular session of council held October 5th, 2009. Motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We have accepted the minutes from October 5th. Under communications, I have several things. One is a letter from Mrs. George Kessel of 41 Charles Street, which is expressing a concern for a property hazard from a tree between her and another neighbor, and I will be turning this over to the administration for them to figure out the best way to deal with that if we can. I was emailed a email from a Rich Kuhn who was in town for homecoming, and I would like to read this. Mr. Bias, this place looks like a goat exploded. That was the uncharacteristic blunt remark my wife made Saturday as we walked through the old neighborhoods of our student days. And it wasn't just the alley between Court and East State Street where she made that remark. Student housing areas in particular and the city in general really do look as bad as they ever have since our days in the early 60s. We're sure there is an ongoing debate between property owners and the city, each claiming that the other should take some initiative in cleaning up the place. The truth is, rental property owners won't do anything without encouragement from the city or the university. The obvious question is, doesn't the city and the university have enough self-respect to try, at least at homecoming and other high-traffic weekends, to put on their best face? Yours truly, Rich Kuhn, 65, Regina Waite Kuhn, class of 66. We will pass the concern on to the administration and to the proper council committee to discuss, and boy, it's not for lack of trying, is it, gang? It is something that many, many people have tried a lot over the years to try to deal with. One that from Andy Stone, our Public Works Director, wanted to make us aware and to let my neighbors on the south side know that there may be slightly more frequent boil advisories than normal on the south side while the Curtis Mulligan water line project is going on. The existing main on Mulligan, which is being replaced, is very old and very brittle and tends to break when disturbed. There are several instances that it will be exposed during the construction of the new line. That could lead to more breaks than normal. The good news is the long-term solution to this problem is exactly what we are doing, replacing the line. So today we did have a break in the line. I know at my home we were without water for a couple of hours midday. I guess to make an omelet you have to break some eggs, so that process is continuing, and I miss Mulligan Drive too. For those on the south side, that is quite a loss. Okay, any other communications? Member Sands.
Mr. President, the communication from the auditor's office, she asks that we accept the auditor's financial reports for October. I think we've all...
October or September?
September.
Sorry.
Did I say that?
That's my fault. I think I did say that
Yeah,
wrong.
it did say that. Yeah, I'm sorry. It is October, so we'll get those reports in a couple
November.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Approve the auditor's financial reports for September. I'm sorry.
Further discussion? Do we have a second? Further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The reports have been accepted. Any other communications? Reports and communications from other elected officials. Let's jump to Kathy Hecht, City Auditor.
Get it over with.
Get it over with.
Okay, I was asked by council to start off our budget timeline schedule for 2010 budget tonight. The first thing I'm going to talk about is the Auditor's Office Finance Review. There was some discussion about a little review for council about how we operate and the process that we go through. I handed out some papers, and the top one is titled Auditor's Office Finance Review. What we do, we handle payroll, accounts payable, fixed assets, tax collection, and financial tracking and reporting for the city. Our accounting system is a fund accounting system. With 66 funds, we use about 55. The different types of funds are governmental, like the general fund, transportation, court, recreation, and debt, and capital projects. And we have capital project funds, and then proprietary and enterprise funds, like water, sewer, garbage, and parking garage. Those funds must stand alone. Revenue must be used for the intended purpose. They're fee-based and not tax-based. The next line I have bolded and italicized there is the authority, appropriation, and money. It's important that all three of those be in line when it comes time to spend money. Revenue, the certified resources are certified with the County Budget Commission. We cannot spend money that's not certified. We changed our certified resources. We amend our certificate on a regular basis throughout the year. One thing that we amend are our projections for revenue if we find out we're getting a new grant or an increase in taxes somewhere, whatever. We also report the appropriations. This is part of the checks and balances in the government system that the Budget Commission reviews what we are appropriating versus what we say we're going to bring in. And you can't appropriate or spend more than what you think you're going to bring in or do bring in. Our, of course, main source of revenue is income taxes at 1.65%. The very last page of your packet, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this stuff, is it's a little history of our tax revenue percentage, our tax mix, and where we are now at the bottom for you to look at to get an idea of how that split is. That tax mix can be changed by council. There are a few things that were voted on, community center, East State Street, that one has gone off now, but those types of voted on recreation are taken off the top, and council cannot change that. Those were voted on, but what's left can be changed and allocated to different funds as council sees fit. Carryover for revenue, we count on carryover every year. We've had this discussion in September, the importance of having that money in the bank when we start the new year, and that's money that is unspent from the year before. Just as you know you're going to make a certain amount of money for the year, you don't write a check for a full year's mortgages at the beginning of the year because you don't actually have that money in hand. You pay it as you get paid. Budget process, the auditor projects the revenue, the mayor presents the expense budget, and council approves. Council also acts as a buffer. They question, prioritize. Sometimes they don't have choices as to how the money is spent. But they can certainly examine and offer suggestions. Expense, the transaction classes, I think you're all familiar with those. The 100s are the personnel. They're called personal. That's not a misspelling on your paper. They're called personal services in our financial software. 2 and 300s are supplies and services. 400 is their debts. I also included the debt schedule, second to last page, for you to look at. We paid off a lot of smaller debts last year, and including the balance on the parking garage. So this is our current debt schedule. 500 are capital funds for capital purchase, and 600 are for refunds and transfers, but not the interfund transfers. The auditor does not control the expenditures. The auditor does track expenditures to be certain they conform to approved budget and authority limits and do not violate the ORC, IRS, ACC, GASB regulations, or other applicable financial requirements of the laws. The auditor's office represents the controls and transparency of the process. Fund balances versus appropriations, I touched on that a little bit. The fund balance is actually your cash on hand, which, as I said, in department or a fund like one of the utilities, that money comes in, throughout the year. It's not all in there on January 1st. An appropriation, if you have it, you can spend it. That's what I put in there. You can appropriate what you think you're going to spend for the whole year, but as I said, if the money is not in the fund, you can't write that check January 1. General information. The legal contracting agent for the city is the Service Safety Director per the ORC. Contracts less than $25,000 do not require council approval, only appropriation. Often, items are brought before council just for transparency reasons and to put it out in the open, but as I said, according to the Ohio Revised Code, that's not necessary. $25,000 is the threshold. Prior year bill threshold is $3,000. So if someone misses a bill in their budget this year, it doesn't encumber it to pay at the beginning of next year. If it's over $3,000, council has to approve it. Does that make sense? Okay, accountability. For me, it's the state auditors and the citizens. They get audited every year by the state. They're the ones that look and make sure that we're adhering to our requirements. Okay, next, I want to apologize. I don't have a written report to give you for revenue projections. I'll get that out this week. I had several people off several days last week, and some other things to deal with, like our interview with the GAO, and so I didn't get that done. If you have any questions, then we could discuss it next Monday. But I will talk about our budget timeline. If everybody has those, I sent those out, and I think I handed them out before. The beginning, of course, is the revenue projections, and this is an old list that we've used, an old but good list that we've used for several years. And so I'll go down this list, and as I said, I'll put some of this in writing and have a final figure for you next week. General fund, our income tax has come in at $6.2 million this year. We're doing pretty good. We saw an increase this year. It's starting to taper off just slightly. I don't expect to have an increase in that for next year. I would count on that as being the same. We had there were several buyouts at OU, so that gives us a bump in our revenue because of the increased amount, their payouts. Those are done about now, or will be this month, I believe. We also took some measures to collect delinquent taxes. We've got over 70,000 collected. Hope to get up a little bit more by the end of the year, but that also is kind of a one-shot deal. However, once we get them on track for paying, we hope that they will continue to pay throughout next year. But that wouldn't be a huge bump in our tax revenue. Fees for service, fines, water, sewer code, solid waste, etc. As the rates have changed, we project the revenue based on those rates. And so it's pretty close to what is, it's pretty easy to define. We know how many utilities customers we have and things like that. Doing pretty good in that respect. The community center has a good budget. They've kept their costs down, and that, of course, that has a tax allotment coming in for a regular revenue, as opposed to recreation, which depends on the programs and how much you charge and all of that. The parking garage, the interest is down on the account for this year, but that is most likely because we paid it off, and so the interest that we give each fund is divided according to the balance in that fund, and so as the fund balance goes down, the interest paid into the fund goes down. But it's a good thing that we paid off that loan. Grants, CDBG, transportation, etc. Whatever we have, that's okay. Those funds, whatever we get approved for, we know what's coming in, and that's what we anticipate for next year. A big one for next year will probably center around the Richland Avenue improvements, although I don't have figures on that. We haven't gotten that information quite yet. TIF is adjusted based on the rate. What comes in, 2/3 of it goes out to the, or a little, about half, I guess, goes out to the school system. And that has been good and increased the last 3 years, but as you know, there's been a big reduction in appraisal on businesses on East State Street, and so that possibly will go down next year. But we mostly use that money that we keep to pay on East State Street, which is down to $1.2 million at this point. Other sources, like fines, fees, court, code, police, are coming in as projected. And I do have something that I will hand out when I'm done with it that will show you that they've come in pretty good this year as anticipated. But we don't expect any big increases in any of that for next year. As far as looking at certain funds and cautiously, the general fund is the big one. We've already talked about the carryover. If you go to the second page in what I handed you, this we might look at. This shows two ways of looking at how we're going to project the carryover. That has to be an educated guess on that. We can't tell for sure which departments might not spend all of their supply money this year and which ones will. But right now, if you look at the top part, there's just two ways of projecting it. Both of them come out about the same, and we expect about a $600,000 carryover in the general fund, which is less than we would like, but it's certainly better than what we thought it might be 3 months ago. And usually that is more than we expect, but I think we're going to need it. We've had union contracts. The personnel services are 80% of any budget, and as those go up every year, that's just something that we have to pay. There's no cutting there. So anyway, if you look at the top part, it says $597,000 left to carry over. If you take the cash in hand and what's estimated to be collected, leave us available at the year end, and then the appropriations remaining to be sent. The bottom part is if you take what's unencumbered and you subtract labor and benefits. We don't encumber salaries and benefits in our system like we do supplies and services and things like that. So that leaves us an available $537,000. Our unappropriated is $123,000, so that shows us about $660,000 left for 2010. So our revenue projection for this year was $10,900,000, and of course these figures are rounded off. We put $600,000 in there. It looks like we'll have $11,500,000 available for our budget for 2010. That last line, though, is important. This year budget was $11,900,000. Now, we did have a 27th pay in there at $350,000. That brings us down to right about $11,500,000. So basically, that tells me our budgets have to remain the same in the general fund next year. Anybody have any questions about that?
Questions or comments for the auditor? Mayor Wild.
A couple things you should notice, of course, is that when they talk about the 27th pay, which is $347,000, and you start saying we have a carryover of $600, we're basically 2 payrolls away from having no money. So you have to look at that and say that's how close to the edge we are at any given time. And again, to reiterate what Kathy said, we met with the GAO Thursday, and essentially, they want to know how the stimulus package is working out for everybody. I think we had a good meeting all in all, but really most of the money hasn't been flowing in yet. But also, they asked how the budget will look in the future. And again, it looks like it's going to be very flat. So these are indicators.
One thing I might add, as I said, the general fund is the one that we look most closely at. A few other funds are pretty close to their budget, although some of them should be in a way. Grant funds, CDBG, you get that money as a grant and you're supposed to spend it. You shouldn't really have a lot of extra money sitting around at the end of the year. Transportation is the same way. The street fund is tight right now, very small, unappropriated balance, about $20,000. However, about $120,000 that should come back. The Safe Routes to Schools is a reimbursable grant, and so that money's been appropriated, but the revenue should come back. The street fund, on the other hand, has other funds with money that available to use, like street rehab and permissive wheel tax and things like that. And so those are, I believe, being held by Andy Stone to be used for Richland improvements next year for our match. Recreation, I did mention that. They're tight, as they always have been. It's hard to change that very much. If you reduce programs, then you also reduce the revenue. And so they don't have another revenue stream, such as a tax, voted tax levy like the community centers, so that they have a regular income coming in. So you have to weigh the cost of the programs against what you're charging, against the revenue, how you want to spend that. Sewer fund is also really doing pretty well. These that I'm looking at aren't any of them in trouble, but what we did was we picked these funds that have that their carryover looks to be less than 8% of their budget, which represents about 30 days of operating money. So they're not doing bad, they just don't have a lot of extra money, which has been the case for years, but we've also, because of changes we made, have been able to pay regularly on the debt and not had to go out and borrow to pay loans and things like that. So they're doing pretty well. Although we might want to change that mix from of what we put into sewer debt from our receipts and to the operating fund. Right now it's 72 and 28. I'd probably suggest that we change it to 75-25 so they have a little more operating money, because that amount of money will cover our debt payments in the sewer fund. But that's something for council to look at. Internal service medical, that one also is less than 8% of their budget for carryover, and things that we've made some changes to our medical insurance payments, and it's important that you have a cushion of operating money in there. You just never know what kind of claims you might have, and so while none of these are in trouble, they have a little bit less than was probably ideal. Thank you, Bill. I think that's it for me, unless there are any other questions for tonight anyway.
Any comments for the auditor?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bringing that up to us and doing the work.
Report Oh, I'm sorry.
The work that is evident there.
Yes. Mayor Weil.
Okay, I'll try keeping it short, but I don't know if I'll be able to. Seems so much there. Just to mention, when you talked about the Curtis Mulligan Street, there is a boil order presently on right now, just so you know. I think it'll end sometime 2 o'clock tomorrow. That's why you didn't have any water.
No.
That's one of the projects that's going on at 249. The last report I got is as of Friday, they contracted place about 1,300 linear feet of the new water line, so that's still going. I did drive up there. The road was open on the weekend, I noticed, with the big zigzag going right down the middle.
You shouldn't let everybody know that.
Why?
Don't let everybody know that.
Okay. Too late. Basically, we're still working on the Harold Avenue drainage improvement project 245. Let's see, according to this, they should be able to move that utility pole will be moved sometime around October 27th. That's what I've been told according to these notes here. And we're still, of course, Key Drive, turning lane, and street improvements is on track as well. I think they're going to resume the project the 19th, which should be today. Again, as stated, there is a boil order present. I did mention that we did meet with the GAO. They were asking how the money's being spent, what's going on. They're really doing a pre-stimulus package questionnaire to get back to, that's their job, to get back to the Congress and everything like that and say, this is what's happening. They wanted a snapshot of what our budget looks like, our revenue looks like, how the city is in terms of healthiness. I guess Kathy spent quite a bit of time, Ray did, putting some numbers together, giving us a snapshot of what was going on. We brought in also Andy Stone into the picture, as well as Captain Pyle for the 2 stimulus package JAG justice grants. Essentially, none of it has been spent so far. I was representing the transit. Well, a little bit has been spent. The transit part of it, of course, is the bus system, which we're going to be rolling out as soon as we can. I'll talk about more of that probably for the next. I think it's on the agenda right now. Let's see. The other 2 things I want to mention are, one is that we're coming up towards the end of the year when they start, the asphalt plants stop, so if you see potholes, report them. That's for everybody. And the last one, of course, is the leaf pickup, which has been rolling along. So just know that it's being done right now, so get your leaves out on the curb if you don't want to break the paint long. Other than that, I don't have much.
Questions or comments for the mayor? On to Law Director Patrick Lang.
No report.
Okay. So on to ordinances for 3rd reading. Ordinance 11409 is an ordinance authorizing design and construction of a school travel plan. Member Nisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for approval of 011409. And this is for, you might remember, this is for this year's construction for the Safe Routes to School project. And it is going through this reading now because $6,500 of the original amount of the grant award is going directly to the city schools. So we're going through this, and this is the final reading for this grant money.
Further comments on ordinance 114? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Jumping to ordinance 12309, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into a contract to provide maintenance and support for the city's telephone and computer networking systems. Member Sands.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 12309.
Do we have a second?
Second?
I'm sorry.
This ordinance provides for a payment this year, an appropriation into the Internal Service Fund of $31,697 and some odd cents. And that's a payment for our insurance for our new communication system, our insurance for this year, and part of a payment for a longer-term insurance, $13,000 worth of longer insurance. So we're paying, with this $31,000 payment, what has happened, what we need to insure 2009, part of it is in arrears, but we just got the bill, and also a forward payment on the insurance for the Proxim equipment maintenance. And finally, it authorizes the Service Safety Director to expend up to $72,000 over the next 3 years for this service. So it'd be $72,000 minus this $31,000 we're already paying. So in future years, the bill will be less.
Further comments? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 123?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 12509 is an ordinance authorizing the adoption of a 3-year agreement with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 2403, and Ohio Council 8 AFL-CIO concerning wages and working conditions and declaring an emergency. Again, Member Sands.
Mr. President, again, I urge adoption of ordinance 12509. I'm going to ask the law director to speak quickly to these two ordinances.
Thank you, Member Sands. This is the first of 2 ordinances that we'll be voting on tonight, addressing recent labor contracts which were negotiated. This first one is with AFSCME Local 2403, which is the city service workers. Those of you, many may remember 2 weeks ago when we had introduced this, I gave a very thorough and comprehensive outline of everything in the contract, and the council president has assured me that if I do sit up here and repeat all of that, I'll be carried out here.
We'll rule you out of order.
So just to hit the very brief economic highlights of this contract, this includes it's a 3-year contract with incremental wage increases of 3%, 2.5%, and 2.5%. It does include insurance concessions on prescription drugs and on premiums, and institutes a uniform clothing allowance with a $500 cap, which the city should realize some savings over the course of the contract with that. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Is there further discussion on ordinance 125? All those in favor of the ordinance?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. On to ordinance 12609 is an ordinance authorizing the adoption of a 3-year agreement with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Local 2403-2, and Ohio Council 8 AFL-CIO concerning wages and working conditions, and declaring an emergency. Again, Member Sands.
Mr. President, I move adoption of ordinance 12609.
Second.
And the law director.
Thank you, Member Sands. This contract, a little different from the last one. This is actually a brand-new bargaining unit within the city, which will, from here on out, be referred to as AFSCME Local 2403-2. This contract, probably the biggest challenge of negotiating this was having to create an entirely new wage structure for the office, which includes the steps that exist in all of our other bargaining unit contracts. And so we have the new structure, which does include a raise for 2 of the positions, and 3 of the positions actually are capped at a level that is lower than where they currently exist. And so this should be a long-term savings to the city as well. This also includes the same insurance package as 2403 and sets working hours of the office from 7:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. with a half-hour unpaid lunch.
Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of 126?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been adopted. Now jumping on to ordinances for first reading. Ordinance 12709 is an ordinance amending the 2009 appropriation ordinance. Members' hands.
Mr. President, this ordinance appropriates $30,000 to the street rehab fund for construction work on Key Drive, which is the new street running from Holzer Clinic to the existing offices and motel and automotive establishment. And the ODOT says that we can't have 2 entrances there. So when Holzer Clinic moved there, they negotiated with the state to put the opening there, and they are going to reimburse us for all the work that we do on Key Drive. So this is the city is doing the work, but we will be reimbursed. And so this is an additional, this is $30,000 for that project. And another $30,000 to the Water Fund 740 for construction contingency on the very project that the President and the Mayor were talking about, the Curtis Mulligan project, which is a very extensive project replacing a lot of pipe and replacing some systems that deal with the sewer lines there. And so the water lines, I'm sorry. Andy Stone suggests that we add this contingency to that contract to allow for any unknowns that occur, as they have been already.
Other comments? Ordinance 12809 is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to extend the agreement with the Board of Athens County Commissioners for the purpose of obtaining the services of the Public Defender's Office for the period from July 109 through December 3109 and declaring an emergency. Member Sands.
Mr. President, I would like to suggest that we consider Ordinance 12809 under suspension of the rules. I'm suggesting suspension because we already have an invoice, and if you look at your ordinance title, the pay period runs from July 1st of this year through December 31st. It's the current period that we need to pay for.
Further discussion on suspension only. All those in favor of suspending council rules on Ordinance 12809?
Aye.
Opposed? The rules are suspended.
Mr. President, I move adoption of Ordinance 12809.
Second.
Again, this is for payment for the public defender, which is available for all citizens of the city of Athens who can't afford an attorney on their own. This is for a payment of $61,683.44 for the 6 months running from July through December of 2009. We have an invoice on hand from the Athens County Commissioners. We will have another payment due in the first half of next year. This $61,000 is a reasonably large savings from what we have been paying, over $70,000.
Actually close to 67, 68, so it just went down a good tenth of it at least.
So we urge adoption.
Yeah.
Further discussion. Mayor Weil.
Having sat in the audience for many years, this usually has been ratcheting up, which is a surprise since it's gone down. There's no guarantee it will stay down. Again, this is for the half year. We have the money appropriated. We had a PO cut for this. We have a PO cut for this. We just, there's no sense, paying it until we have a contract in hand, which is why we're waiting and why we need to suspend it. Again, this will result in a savings of about $7,000 to $8,000, somewhere in that range. We'll probably see another one of these coming in January sometime, or 2 months into the next cycle. And we'll have to be looking at that time.
Very good. Other comments? All those in favor of adoption of 128? Aye. Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 12909 is an ordinance determining to proceed with sidewalk and curb construction and improvements on Carpenter Street as described in Resolution R0209. Member Sands.
Mr. President, again, I'd like to consider Ordinance 012909 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
I'm asking for suspension here. We did just pass a resolution 2 weeks ago at our meeting that dealt with some dissents we'd had from the assessments for sidewalk work, and we had a citizen board who made a recommendation, and we accepted their recommendations. This is one of two ordinances that will follow that resolution that we just passed. And if you read the text of your ordinance, you'll see that it says that it is proceeding, it allows the city to proceed with this work. The work has already been done, and we need to file these assessments for property owners who need to pay for that.
Is there further discussion on suspension only? All those in favor of suspension? Opposed? The rules have been suspended.
Mr. President, I move for adoption of Ordinance 12909.
Second.
Really for all the reasons I went on and on about just a moment ago.
Again, further discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 129 has been adopted. Ordinance 13009, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise and accept bids where necessary and enter into contracts for transit capital improvements and authorizing an interfund transfer and declaring an emergency. Member Bain.
Mr. President, in a moment I'm going to ask the mayor to discuss this. My part is mainly in Section 3, so I thought I'd spend a moment saying a few things about that. What we're doing here, and the mayor will talk about this, is doing some transit capital improvements using stimulus funds. And so we have to advance those. And that's Section 2. Section 3, we're going to be borrowing from the Community Center Debt Fund, and the mechanisms are outlined. In 4 and 5, this will not be a problem. And you can see as we go forward, it looks like there's a typo in Section 6. I don't know. Maybe not. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yep, there's some Roman numerals, aren't there, or is it my mistake? Yeah, no biggie. Okay, Mayor Weil, can you explain what's going on?
Section
If
7.
I can interrupt, Member Bain, I've had the clerk point out to me that this must meet a November 1st program deadline. So,
Oh, we
in
wouldn't
our
want to rush
time-honored
into anything.
tradition, you may wish to
Well, we
move for
established that the
consideration.
section numbers are just typos. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
All right, well, let the
Below the
mayor
record
talk in
reads-
a moment. We'd like to consider, although I looked for a date, I didn't see one in here, but heaven knows there's enough words in here. Oh, there it is.
Beginning under
It's the next
Section
page.
5.
Yeah, it's the second
Yeah.
page.
7.
The second
Not
page.
to be confused with Section 5 on mine.
All right. It's lots of fun.
Yeah.
All right, just a barrel of laughs. Okay, I would like to move to consider 13009 under suspension of the rules.
Second.
The reason is that although we have been notified of the award, it took a while to get the actual framework operating, and the mayor did some traveling, and so we see the 1st of November deadline. Now we have to actually submit, so we have to meet that deadline. That's the suspension.
Further discussion on suspension only. All those in favor of suspension?
Aye.
Opposed? Council has suspended the rules on ordinance 13009.
Move adoption of 13009. Okay, I outlined what was in the ordinance and renumbered the sections, and now I'm going to ask the mayor to please tell us what's happening.
Thank you for doing all that, Nancy.
It was nothing, believe me.
What you're seeing here is we actually are transferring from the community debt fund, I believe it is, to the transportation fund, the 214. It's $139,000. We won an award from the stimulus package for about $179. Of that, $440,000 of that is capitalized maintenance. That does not require an upfront use of money. They just send it to us for our maintenance program. This does include, of course, for this stimulus package money, the remaining $139 as an extra transit bus, another transit bus for about $60,000. A new bus shelter. There's been discussion why we didn't ask for more, but I don't know how they chose just to give us one for about $6,000. A portable lift to help our maintenance for our buses, so they can actually lift them up and work underneath without having to crawl underneath. I believe I gave you many of these things as well. An impact wrench, which I have no idea why we chose to do it, except that was at the mechanics wanted at the bus garage. New bike racks, 6 more bike racks, which of course are quite obvious. I think that's a good idea. And the fare boxes to add new fare boxes as they wear out. All the stimulus money, a lot of it, depending on which program you go through, and I'm learning more about it all the time. Some of them you get money up front. Most of them you don't. You have to actually spend the money, send a bill to them, or something, a record that you have actually bought the stuff, or ordered the stuff, or paid for the stuff, and therefore you get reimbursed. That means we had a cash flow problem. They want this to be bid out and spent out, or at least in the works by November 1st. They'd like to have everything in place. We're busy getting bids ready for a portable lift. We're trying to put the bus shelter. We're looking at specs for that. The light transit bus, the LTV, which I think I gave you a handout last week on this. That's pretty much a state contract that we don't have to bid that out. But again, it's a question of cash flow, which is what we're trying to work on. We have another bus that we had put in capital line this year, so we have another bus which we had already programmed in before the stimulus package got in place. Again, most of the stimulus package stuff seems to be, put it in quickly. They wait around till they get the guidelines correct. They bring the GAO in to check it out and make sure we're doing it right, even though we haven't gotten it yet, and then they want to suspend it. So that's why there's a rush, and that's why there's a cash flow issue. Section 3, which is what Nancy's talking about, I believe, is it in Section 3 we're going to put the money back in? Is that going in one of these sections here?
Section 4.
Section 4. That's the one she wants to make sure that we notice too, that what money will go back into the same fund. It's a simple transfer to get reimbursement on it. The reimbursements are 100%. The only...
Section 16.
What?
We're just trying to get our section.
I think it's Section 6, but I wouldn't confuse myself over that anymore.
Never mind, it'll go back.
Oh, yeah, Section 4, okay. We got our tracks of them. Section 6, sorry.
I was right, there was Section 4.
Okay, but the gist of it is that we are getting some stimulus money. It requires an upfront cost, and that's what we're trying to put through. We could always just turn around and say we don't want it, but that would probably hinder us more than anything else. Any
With all that
questions?
said, is there further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of ordinance 13009?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance is adopted. Ordinance 13109 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to submit an application and enter into contract with the Ohio Department of Transportation, ODOT, for Safe Routes to Schools Fund and declaring an emergency. Member Noisley.
Mr. President, I ask that we consider 013109 under suspension.
Of course you do.
And as noted in an earlier ordinance, this is the same, that we have a fast approaching deadline. The grant deadline for this Safe Routes to School project for this coming year is November 1, November 2nd. So we would need to apply now.
Further discussion on suspension only. All those in favor of suspension?
Aye.
Opposed? The rules have been suspended on ordinance 131.
Mr. President, I move for adoption of
Second.
013109, and for purposes of being able to apply for the Safe Routes to School program for the coming year.
Further discussion. Mayor Weil.
This is obviously the second round. You just passed an earlier one. Again, this is to make a better, safer, pedestrian-friendly city. If you look at the whereas there, there's obviously we're talking about the Fort to Armory stair construction, which I think is a good idea. So we just keep trying for these things.
Other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ordinance 131 has been adopted. Under ordinance 13209, it's an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into an LPA federal project agreement with the state of Ohio through the Director of Transportation for rehabilitation of the Richland Avenue 682 intersection and Richland Avenue Bridge, project number 230, and declaring an emergency. Member Noisley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. This, as the title explains, is to allow the mayor to enter into an LPA agreement, which is the agreement that the city enters into with ODOT to coordinate the activities for the improvement of Richland Avenue. And it describes it as a safety project to improve the geometrics, widen the existing roadways, rehabilitate the Richland Avenue Bridge, and provide project enhancements at the intersection of State Route 62 and Richland Avenue in the city of Athens. Total project cost for this, much of which have been provided for, and a good deal have been provided for in grant funds, is total cost is $5.8 million.
Other comments? Ordinance 13309 is an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to suspend temporarily the fee for parking at metered spaces in the municipal parking garage and declaring an emergency. Member Noisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. Earlier this fall, in August, we received a letter from the Athens County Chamber of Commerce on behalf of the Athens Uptown Business Association, and their request was to look at a new idea for parking during the holidays or towards the end of the year. And last week at the Transportation Committee, we did have some discussion of this, and the proposal that they brought forth was to consider, rather than having free parking on the streets from the Friday after Thanksgiving through the New Year, to consider having free parking in the portion of the city municipal garage, and to allow for free 2-hour parking, and to bag the meters there instead. And we have obtained some additional information. I know we needed some information on the revenues from street meters as opposed to parking garage, and Mr. Hazlett and Ms. Paula Horan Mosley have provided us with additional information about that.
Is there other comments on Ordinance 133? Member Bain.
Okay. When we left last time, I thought we were going from about the 15th of December to the 26th, and now it's back, even though it's a totally new venue. And we talked about that, Chris, and maybe that's not so bad. But as this is written, it'll be in effect now until it's stopped. So I think we need to say 2009 and then evaluate it before 2010, because we're going to be on semesters before you know it, and that will make a big difference. I don't think we're going to be giving free parking in the garage at that point in time. And at least it's not a question that I'm going to go along with.
Okay, and I would agree with the discussion last week was to try it for this year.
Yeah, and $1,000 here, $1,000 there, it's real money. That's what, I know it wasn't a bountiful amount, and we'll have better information after this.
Right.
But let's amend it to say 2009, if you don't mind. Would you do that?
Okay. And so, Mr. President, I move to amend 13309.
And second. Motion and a second to amend it.
And the purpose would be to amend it to restrict this to 2009.
And the clerk will reflect that. Motion and a second to amend as stated. Is there further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment as stated?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been amended and read for the first time. Member Sands.
Let me just make a comment about this free parking. It is for 2-hour period only. Our meter readers will be watching for that. We'll be marking tires, I guess, to monitor that. So it's not free all-day parking or all-night parking. It's 2 hours to hopefully encourage people to shop uptown Athens.
Other comments?
And as a sequel to what Jim said, it's important for people who think, well, it's only $2,000 we'll lose in revenue, to remember that we are paying the salaries during this time period of the people who normally do parking enforcement. So it's not just $2,000.
Other comments? Ordinance 13409, an ordinance authorizing preliminary engineering of the Richland South Project number 244. Member Noisley.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance will allow for the preliminary engineering, as described in the title, of the Richland South Project. And this area is below or south of the Richland 682 intersection, so it's a separate project. And what it will be doing is working on technical studies for some long-term improvements to that area on Richland Avenue, which will go from Dairy Lane on down south to the intersection of Richland Avenue and the old Pomeroy Road. What it will allow for, or what it will be looking at in these technical studies, will be access management, possibility of a shared left turn lane, pedestrian facilities, bike path. We'll also be looking at Coates Run, which in the past has been a problem with flash flooding. We'll look at the storm drains, the utilities, and street lighting.
Other comments? Mayor Weil.
I think Kent had something.
I'm sorry. Member Butler.
I'm camouflaged. Mike. I just want to say that I'm appreciative of this effort, looking into this, because I think there's a lot of needs that need to be addressed on Richland Avenue. Again, I've voiced publicly some of the concerns that community members have raised to me about the safety for pedestrians and cyclists on Richland Avenue. So I'm looking forward to seeing this move forward.
Mayor Weil.
As Member Butler stated, during the various public hearings we had about the roundabout, the intersection 682 in Richland, many of the participants were saying, what about the southern part of Richland? And so therefore this is going to look at that. The other consideration we want to look at spending this type of money is that when the stimulus package money came at us, many things were, quote unquote, to be shovel ready. You start looking at many of the projects we have, and we have preliminary studies on some of these things. We have none in some cases, and this is one of the things that hamstrung us. This we're looking at as like a first step in trying to put a design together for that Richland Avenue corridor. It's preliminary, but at least it's the first step to say somewhere in the future we'll be able to, garner support, engineering, design, and hopefully grant monies to fix any problems that are there. So that, as I say, it's a little one, and no different than our bike transit master plan. To try, a little bit goes a long way when you start off small like this. And as I say, one thing we're seeing regularly is that we did not, a lot of the engineering for the water projects, we did not have an engineering design in place to pursue the stimulus package money as well as we could. Most of the time, because you don't spend that money if you don't think you're going to be able to follow through on it. And so it's a little future-looking.
Thank you. Other comments? Ordinance 13509, an ordinance authorizing the Service Safety Director to enter into contract for design services to promote a clean energy program. Member Gosney.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is related to the Athens Solar Initiative work to develop a municipal program to finance solar energy in the city. And we've been working on it for some time, mostly myself in the mayor's office. And we're at the point where getting some outside expert help in designing the program could really push us to the next level. As the mayor just mentioned, sometimes you need preliminary work for grant funding, and there will be state and federal stimulus funding available for these types of programs in the next few weeks or a couple months. We haven't seen the deadlines yet, but they will be coming very soon. So this will allow the mayor to hire some of the outside experts to actually help us do some of this design work on the program. And with some of these deadlines coming up quickly, I do need to propose an amendment to the ordinance to add an emergency clause stating that this shall be an emergency measure necessary for the preservation of health, welfare, and safety of the residents of the city of Athens, Ohio, in order to prepare for imminent ARA funding opportunities. So that would be an additional section.
Do we have a second on the proposed amendment? Motion and a second. Further discussion on the amendment as stated. All those in favor of the amendment as stated?
Aye.
Opposed? The ordinance has been amended and read for the first time. Any other comments? Member Sands.
Question. Member Gosney, you were talking about ARA funding, stimulus funding, as a possibility for this activity or activities to follow.
I apologize. The stimulus funding would be to fund a loan program.
Okay.
So to establish hopefully a revolving loan fund within the city to finance solar installations. So this is separate. This is for initial work to get the program ready for those applications.
Okay, thank you.
Other comments? Member Bain?
I have two comments, and I've been discussing this a bit with Oahu, and he and the mayor are to be congratulated, and I think we need to open it up a little bit to some other considerations, and that's why I'm saying what I'm going to say. I have some experience with solar, and I know that mine is with Third Sun, and perhaps those of you who have not had this experience would not understand how lengthy and involved their participation is in this process. And if my husband knew where it was, I would have him pull out the, I will try for next time, bring out the materials that they brought. I mean, part of the cost of doing business, apparently, is to do such a fantastic job. I'm sure Dovetail does the same thing. So I would not think that it would be a problem at all with the development of proposals. But I think also, and I told this to Oahu, I think there's some legislative decisions that have to be made before we go forward on this solar loan program. I am Foursquare. I have personal finance involved in solar. But I want to make sure that low and moderate income people, residents, have a shot at the program. Secondly, and this is the big one, rental property. 75% of the housing stock in Athens is rental. Commercial property, another question. I would like to have a dialogue on this before we proceed. And I think that, of course, we're not going to have any loans to people who work for the city or are involved in this in any way to make it look really clean. But you know, I'd like to discuss. Those are really legislative decisions. Those are not something someone in Berkeley or anywhere else can figure out. And I hope next time we can put that on the agenda and see where the support is for those things: low and moderate income, rental property, commercial property, and then, of course, I guess it seems self-evident. You know, if you're going to try for a loan, you better exempt yourself right away for conflict of interest. And those are things that I think we as, I don't want someone from Berkeley telling me, well, you've got to do it this way. First of all, we have 75% of the housing stock and rental property. What does that mean? And then we start talking about the income levels involved. I mean, and the prospects of the houses. I mean, we may have a very small number when we get down to it. And I just think we have a policy question that is a council question, and I would like to discuss it.
Other comments? Mayor Weil.
In our conversations, and we've been meeting pretty much weekly on, we have discussed at times the rental issue. That is, we are aware of the high percentage. I think the discussion is that we want to leave it as open as possible to everybody. So I think we've been putting the rental market in there, the landlords in there. The question, of course, then becomes a little sticky one of how. A lot of it would depend on how much money we have in a revolving loan fund, whether we offer to the homeowner first and the rental market second. That's been brought around. The next one is, will the House Bill 1 Special Improvement District actually cover a, when you say rental, a commercial structure? So those are some of the issues that have been kicked around. We have not concluded it. So we have had conversations with Dovetail and Third Sun, and I forget the name of the third group.
That's renewable power.
Yeah.
But again, let me stress that this would be a legislative policy decision that should be made by 7 people. And you know, it's that sort of, you know, I think that there are issues out there that really have to be. And I was sort of trying to get them last week, but I apparently didn't do a very good job of it because it's kind of full speed ahead. But I do wish that we could talk about this in what exactly it would mean in the future. There was a time with CDBG competitive money where there were not enough people to take that were rental units to take the loans, and that was probably before the time even you were sitting in the audience. We sent it back. That was a way long time ago, maybe Bruce Burns era.
I'm aware of that.
You're aware that we did that
once.
Now it was pre-chip. It was when we had home repairs. And then there was, you know, I think that there was as part of the station project and West Side rehabilitation, we did set up a revolving loan fund for businesses, which is the one that morphed into Gary Seeley's. Believe it or not, I was on that small business group. And I cannot I mean, I think that it's not so complex as you might think. If we're paying someone $10,000 to write or $15,000, whatever it is, to write the application, okay. But it seems like some of these things that we've seen are pretty loosey-goosey. And I'm only speaking as a member of the Environment Committee, and this is my chance, so I would like to have a wider discussion with more people to talk about this, because it will be something that we will be asked about.
I will schedule a work session sometime in the next week or two for us to have that discussion.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Are there any other comments on ordinance 135? On to announcements and other business. Are there any announcements anyone wishes to make or committee meetings for next time? Member Bain.
Utilities Committee, unless everybody wants to just get ready for Halloween, we could skip it for a month. I actually am going to meet with Andy and Angela and talk about those utilities issues. And I think Chris and I might team up and go at the same time eventually on this, so as not to deplete his time resources. But I expect to be back, and then we should also talk about some other things that are out there hanging around.
Member Sands.
We need, as the auditor pointed out, we need to begin the budget discussion, so we will do that. We'll try not to take the whole night. We'll schedule ourselves, yeah. But that's what we'd like to do.
Member Butler.
Thank you, sir. I neglected to bring my calendar with me, and so I'm asking for help in remembering this. But I believe there was Athens Municipal Arts Commission public meeting at Arts West next Wednesday.
5:30.
Correct, at 5:30, I believe, to 7. So I just wanted to announce that as well to the public.
Want to mention it one more time to make sure everybody gets it.
Sure. For those of you in TV land and the internet, 5:30 p.m., the Athens Municipal Arts Commission will be meeting at Arts West. Thank you.
On the
Next
21st.
Wednesday. Thank you. Yes.
Yes.
Mr.
Member
President,
Nisley.
in case the Transportation Committee might have some items that we need to discuss, I'd like to request committee meeting.
Very good.
Arts Commission?
There's a public meeting, policy meeting of the Athens Municipal Arts Commission not this Wednesday, Wednesday afterwards, 5:30. I think they're looking at their policies and where they want to go. I did receive a notice of it, but I didn't really track
It's
it.
the 21st. It's the 28th.
28th, okay.
Okay, Greg? Okay. Let's see, did I see another hand down here?
Can I have a small
Yes.
development?
Planning and Development Committee, a short one, not a small one. Is that what you mean? Could be a small one? You could be right. Small development.
Just
A
miscellaneous.
small development that may be coming along. Okay. Next item on our agenda is an opportunity for citizens to speak on any legislative items or city services that we did not cover on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone wishing to speak before council? Seeing none and having had addressed all items on our agenda, we stand adjourned.